Hello, members of Craneco and other guests in the room. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. My name is Ali Kassam, and I'm joined by Catherine Haney, Nick Carpenter, and Kyle Sheeran. And we're excited today to present to you a plan to get Crane currency into brand protection. I want to get started with the agenda first. So first, we're going to talk about the business question. What's the context? What's the challenge? What is our recommendation for it? Also, the market analysis, analyzing the markets we're asking Crane to get into. Brand protection strategy for Crane currency. We're going to finish off with financials and implementation, and then lastly talk about what other future uses do we see for Crane currency's technology. So going into the context of the challenge, if you look at the quote above me, you'll actually see about this right from the Crane currency website. Whether it's the expertise, the trust, the history, or the relationships, we want to make sure no matter what industry Crane currency enters next, they can use all of these to their advantage as pillars and as bedrocks of the businesses they've had since 1801. So no matter where we look in the future, these are things we kept in mind for our recommendations. Talking about the assignment, of course, the client is Crane currency and the assignment is brand protection. But what are our goals that we're setting for today? Number one is to maintain the core business. Look at the banks and making sure we're mitigating any bank risk, but also generating new revenue in brand protection, but also entering industries that we can go ahead and have long-standing growth in and be a leader in brand protection for years to come. With that, let's look at Crane currency's current state right now. What we'll see is great revenue numbers, a lot of relationships, patents, and technology. Well, as we know, over a year ago, Crane currency was acquired by Craneco. And what that's done is change the business landscape. Yes, it's changed the numbers on the screen, but it's also changed the foundational relationships that Crane currency now can acquire and have because of their parent company, Craneco, and all their different industrial relationships. So with that, I want to jump right into our recommendation for brand protection. And that's for Crane currency to expand their core business to include brand protection for two different industries. That's automotive parts and medical devices. Overall, we think this is going to result in an MPV of $475 million over the next 10 years. So let's get a little more into that. As Crane currency, the first step is to invest, whether it's the sales force or the research and development, to partner with these industries of automotive parts and manufacturers. Next, we're going to integrate, and last, we're going to integrate into the product development and supply chain of these industries, and that will lead to that $475 million MPV. But what we'll also do is invest in a willingness to pay for these manufacturers. Whether it's a 2.9 times ROI for the OEMs and the auto parts side, or an 11.8 ROI for the OEMs and the manufacturer side of medical devices, both will have incentive to pay more here. So with that, let's get into the number one concern that we identified in this case, and that was the bank concerns. We want to make sure these banks are alleviated the concerns in three different metrics that we measured all different industries by. That's a new design of material, a consumer consideration, and a secure distribution network that already exists. This was the first category that we looked at for any of the industries we analyzed. Everything from aerospace to cosmetics to defense to pharmacy. We looked at the bank risk first more than anything. But next up was revenue opportunity. Can Crane currency make money from this business? Product application. Can the tech actually be applied to these products physically? A market impact. Who is the current competitive set? And can Crane currency with their technology compete here? And then lastly, company alignment. Does it fit in the business sense and does it fit in the culture and values? What we saw were medical devices and auto parts go to the top of the list and check all the boxes. And these are the two strategies individually that we want to present to you today. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Catherine Haney to talk over our automotive parts strategy.
Thanks, Ali. So brand protection for automotive parts is a very lucrative market for Crane currency. And so I'm going to walk you through the first part of our strategy, which is to expand into this industry. So let's take a look at the problem. Counterfeit auto parts represent $12 billion of global lost sales to auto manufacturers. Counterfeit auto parts cause 20% of road accidents globally. And in 2017, there are more than 100 million reports of counterfeit auto parts in circulation. So all of these factors pose a huge risk to consumer safety as well as brand equity for auto part manufacturers and drive demand for an industry solution. So why is auto part security a great fit for Crane currency? We base this decision on 5 factors. First of all, there's low risk to the bank because the security is visually distinct from that on banknotes. Secondly, it's a high volume industry, so the revenue opportunity is large. The tech can be easily embedded on metal and plastic, so no problem with repurposing. There are only a few large manufacturers in this space, so the market entry will be rather easy, and Cranco already has relationships that you can leverage in this space. So let's take a look at the distribution chain for auto parts and where the counterfeiting problem comes in. There are two main types of suppliers in this space. Tier 1 suppliers go directly to the manufacturers, and Tier 2 suppliers go to manufacturers, auto shops, and end consumers. Tier 1 suppliers are fairly secure because the relationship is direct and they've been working with these suppliers for a long time. With Tier 2 suppliers, however, we see a problem because of the multiple channels where counterfeiters can infiltrate the supply chain. We spoke to an industry expert in this field who also verified this and said that he recognized a great need for a solution within his company. And so we recommend that Cranco or Crank Currency tackles this problem by approaching the manufacturers, because these are the major influencers in the industry who own all of the supply chain leverage. So one of the huge benefits of working within the automotive part industry is that the market is owned by 10 major players, so you can use your resources very wisely and create only a few major relationships. These big 10 car manufacturers own 45% of the market, so if you can establish strong relationships with at least one of them, you'll be well on your way to high market share. And an added benefit is that 6 out of the 10 of these players operate also in the truck manufacturing space, where Cranco already has relationships to leverage. So let's take a look at how you might execute in this market. The first step is to invest in R&D, and this involves product development as well as market research. The result will be a customized micro-optics product that can be very specific to auto industry needs. The second step is to hire a sales force. We recommend, based on studies from IBM and Cron.com, that you hire 60 salespeople and prioritize previous auto experience so that these folks can sell to front-end channels like procurement as well as back-end channels like technical engineers. The third step in the process is to leverage your existing relationships. And if done effectively, this can expedite your process to gain 5% market share within the next 3 years. So you might be wondering what other players are doing in this space. Auto manufacturers recognize a huge need for prevention of counterfeit auto parts, and they've established brand protection teams to tackle this problem. These teams, however, are fairly limited with the security solutions that they offer, and so this is where we see a huge opportunity for Crank Currency to step in and a big willingness to buy. There are 2 competitors in this space, but their technology is very different from Cranco because they focus on printing barcodes and other tracking technologies, so it's not as secure because it can be reproduced by counterfeiters, therefore not totally eliminating the counterfeit problem. So this is an example of a product mock-up that we did on an auto part that happens to be one of the most highly counterfeited auto parts within the supply chain. It's called a master cylinder, and it has a huge impact on the safety of the car. This is what the product or what motion surface would look like on something like this. So let's take a look at the quantitative summary for the auto part strategy. Auto manufacturers are currently spending around $12 billion average, or they're losing $12 billion in sales on average each year. And if we boil this down to the 5% of the market that we can secure with motion surface technology, we can trade that cost for a $150 million investment on their part, delivering a 2.9 times ROI across the industry. So there's huge willingness to buy here because we're delivering value to the client. And we're going to do this by pricing the motion surface strips at 11 cents per unit, offering a profit margin of 7%, and delivering an MPV of $333 million over the next 10 years. So now I'm going to pass it off to Nick Carpenter to talk about the next part of our strategy.
Thanks, Kat. So much like the auto parts industry, the medical device industry is facing a counterfeiting issue as well. So let's take a look at what that looks like today. So firstly, there are $31 billion in annual lost sales to manufacturers in this space. Secondly, over 200,000 people die every year due to complications of using counterfeit auto parts, medical parts. And thirdly, 8% of the total medical device market share is counterfeit and only growing. This shows that there's a huge incentive for companies that are willing to pay in order to recover sales, but also there's huge safety risk for health. Moving forward into why this is a good fit for Cranco, we're going to hit back on our decision matrix. It's visually distinct from banknotes. There's a large market share to capture. Tech can be embedded on metal and plastic, which is what the vast majority of medical devices are made out of. OVD tech does secure the need in the marketplace and does provide a new solution for the problem. And there's opportunity for a strong market presence here because we're going to leverage Banco's previous relationships in the medical device space with manufacturers that already exist. So then let's look into how is the industry handling the counterfeit problem right now. So it's being handled on 3 different fronts. Firstly, manufacturers like Johnson & Johnson and Medtronic. Secondly, large hospital groups. And thirdly, government agencies like the FDA or the World Health Organization. Manufacturers are utilizing brand teams with limited expertise. So the problem there is that they don't have the scope or the reach to really end the problem in entirety. So all they can do is reduce it to an extent. Hospital groups are employing procurement experts and quality assurance teams in order to check the product as it comes in. But the problem is that small hospitals don't have enough resources, and larger hospitals fail to allocate resources appropriately and scale they need to. And also, they are vulnerable to kickback incentives from low quality suppliers. Thirdly, government agencies are attempting to take action on a twofold approach. Number one, they're trying to promote awareness and how this industry is growing in order to educate consumers, but also they're trying to pass laws in the legislature in order to get ahead of the process. But the problem is that this industry moves fast and government moves slow. So how are we going to enter this market, and how are we going to target these 3 components? So firstly, manufacturers. We're going to leverage relationships in the industry that we're getting from our parent company due to our acquisition. Secondly, are the hospital groups. We're going to work with the current structure of industry sales reps that go from manufacturer to hospital. And if we're able to get these sales reps to promote our product and show it to hospitals and what it does, we're going to be able to get into the market and grab a large market share right away. And then government agencies, we're going to begin lobbying on a twofold approach here. Firstly, to get our name out there, raise awareness and why our product is great. And secondly, to lobby for the longevity of our product and making the OVD microtechnology the standard in medical device security. So then that's how we're going to handle the new entry into the market. Now let's look at what our future could look like, our future product in this space. So a big issue in the market right now is single-use medical products are being used multiple times. This represents a problem on, number one, it's due to hospitals cutting costs and it's hurting patient safety. Secondly, it's causing a loss of sales because if products are being used more than one time, that's a lost sale that could have been made at the manufacturer level. Our solution here is to develop a one-time seal that once it's used one time, the surgeon or whoever's responsible can mark the product or destroy it, and that way that the next person who goes to use the product can easily see that this has already been used and is no longer valid. This also allows us to command a new margin increase opportunity of 15% because we're selling a better product that provides more value and so people will be more willing to pay. So here's another example of a product mock-up in the medical device space and what that could look like for a company like Medtronic. So then, to wrap that up with some quantitative summary. So this is going to add value to the client. Right now, they're spending $1.5 billion a year to secure 5% of their market. That's through their brand protection teams and other aspects. And we're offering a solution that's only going to cost them $70 million to secure that same 5%. That's a huge return for them at 11.86 ROI, and that really increases their willingness to pay and why we're going to be able to command the market share that we estimated. Secondly, is the company value is going to provide a transparency. So we're seeing each tag being sold at 11 cents per unit at a 5% market share and a 5.4% profit margin. That's going to give us $141 million NPV in this space at a 9.6% WAC. And not only is it going to provide value to Franco and to clients, it's also going to provide 10 less casualties worldwide due to counterfeit medical devices being taken out of the space. Now I'm going to throw it to Kyle, financial implementation, and then
thank you, Nick. Okay, I'd like to take the time to walk you through our financials and implementation strategy, starting with a summary of our net present value. As you can see, our recommendation incorporates investments across R&D, a sales force, and capacity expansion. We set a price point of 11 cents per unit for use on the tags and can generate profit margins of 7% and 5.4% in our two targeted industries. This results in a 5% market share in both industries in 2022 and results in a $474 million net present value over 10 years. Next, I'd like to talk about some of the risks associated with our strategy, starting in the automotive parts industry. Not being first to market, Crane Currency will not be the first to enter this physical security market within automotive parts. However, Crane Currency's technology is more advanced and more secure, thank you, and will be, which adds additional value and incentive for automotive manufacturers to partner with Crane. A lack of consumer knowledge is consumers aren't necessarily understanding the security that Crane Currency's device can give to them. The solution to that is partnering with manufacturers across the value chain to launch informational campaigns to inform consumers about what Crane Currency's technology does and how it secures the authenticity of their product. Moving on to medical devices, our project scope is three-pronged. We're targeting manufacturers, hospital groups, and government bodies to partner with and work, which is a large strategy. However, we're able to show that even limited execution, working only with manufacturers, still remains impactful and still generates the positive net present value associated with this project. Finally, the market is widespread with suppliers who are creating different types of medical devices. To combat this issue, we've used very conservative estimates and what we think we can capture in the market. And our data still shows a positive net present value with this strategy. Next, I'd like to move on to our implementation timeline. In 2019, the goal is to focus on R&D in both automotive parts and medical devices and develop a strategy to move forward. In 2020, we want to begin internal prototype testing and hiring a sales team in both industries. We also think this is the ideal time to start targeting the relationships that we want to create with government organizations. In 2021, we move into an external prototype testing phase, where we'll be working with OEMs on the front end, such as a procurement team, and the back end, such as a technical engineer in the automotive parts industry, and begin discussions with hospital groups for our medical devices. 2022 sees a full rollout and full integration of Crane Currency's motion surface technology in both industries. And 2023 sees the opportunity to grow and expand, such as exploring scalable technology in automotive parts and securing OVD tech as the industry standard for medical devices. And now that we've talked through our strategy for medical devices and for auto parts, Crane asked us where else this technology could be used outside of brand protection. Our team was able to identify licenses and passports as an ideal fit for securing technology outside of brand protection. The market, there's revenue potential within the market, but the way that it functions right now is there's 16 suppliers doing one thing. Our recommendation is to make Crane be the one supplier doing one thing. To conclude, Crane Currency came to us with a business problem on how to expand into brand protection. Our team targeted automotive parts and medical devices as the ideal industries, and our strategy results in 73% revenue growth over 10 years and a $474 million net present value. With that, I'd like to say thank you and open up the floor for any questions that you may have.
So walk me through how we're going to approach this business, right? So let's start with auto parts. Like, how do we start to get in this? Clearly, there's a lot of different auto parts out there. Which ones do we choose? How do we enter the market?
I'll take that. Ali, if you'll bring up the most commonly counterfeited items. So we don't expect that auto manufacturers will secure their entire supply chain, and that's why we projected a 5% parts that we can secure within that distribution chain. And of all of the parts that go into a car, we're looking at those that have the most implication to consumer safety, such as airbags, the product that we showed you called the master cylinder, and others that if they fail or if they were not a genuine part, they would cause road accidents, not only causing casualties, but tarnishing the brand of the auto manufacturer. So these are just a few of those parts that we think auto manufacturers will want to tackle first.
Which of the Big 10 manufacturers would you target initially and why?
So I can talk to that one. So firstly, our main target would be Nissan, and the reason they're being is that they're currently providing the most robust brand protection team in the industry. And so since they're showing that they're willing to invest the most in it, we're assuming that they're going to be the most willing to want this new technology to help them on the front. They obviously care about it. But secondly would be in any of the other Big 10, and it would mostly be based on consolidation. So, if we can hit GM and Ford because they have factories in one place in the US, say Detroit, and that would be a better integration of our sales team. But apart from that, they're all roughly similar in size.
And the only thing I'd like to add to that point is that since Crane Co., the parent company of Crane Currency, already has relationships within the industry of trucks, 6 out of 10 of these manufacturers are also truck manufacturers that do work semi-closely. So there would be a opportunity to get into that marketplace with these 6 manufacturers specifically as well.
Okay, so if Nissan has invested the most out of the Big 10 in brand protection, presumably they would have the most capacity or ability in this space. So what is it that you bring that they can't do internally or couldn't begin to do internally over the next couple of years?
I can take this one. I think what we're offering with our technology, or what Crane is capable of offering, is an assistance to Nissan's current brand protection teams. It's clear that there are still automotive parts that are being counterfeited, and Nissan being an aggressive company in trying to stop this counterfeiting and stop those parts from getting into the supply chain. What we're doing is offering a value add to them. We're helping it be easier to police their products and keeping end-use consumers more informed about how to identify something that's authentic versus a secondhand or a counterfeit part.
The only thing I'd like to add to that one, Kyle's exactly right, but when you think about Crane Currency, it's the unreplicable technology that really comes into play. We're offering motion surface to these manufacturers, and as you can see, it's the highest of Crane Currency's technology, as we all know here, and we'll be able to provide something that they won't be able to find in the marketplace or internally at a Nissan or at a Toyota.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay, so these are just some shocking numbers for me. So I just kind of want to understand where you're getting some of this information. So 20% of all road accidents globally caused by counterfeit auto parts. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so that number's from the AMCA. It's the Automotive Manufacturing. No, it'll be the first slide on auto parts. And it's from actually the same Nissan study. Neurotax, the main competitor in the space, has also quoted this number. Because of the high rates of counterfeiting parts in India and in China and some of our countries in Asia, those numbers really do skyrocket and make an American number, which I think we found was about 5%, that much higher for the global number at 20%.
Okay.
Are there other numbers you have questions about?
Yeah, 200,000 people die every year due to counterfeit medical devices. So talk to me about that one.
If you'd like to.
Sure. This was a study done by the Medical Plastic Research Institute, and they showed that more than 1.7 million injuries and nearly 80,000 deaths are linked to medical devices over 10 years. We just extrapolated that down from 10 years down to a per year basis. And then we extrapolated that from there down to the US market by taking the proportion of counterfeit devices that are in the US market versus the global market. It brings us to 200,000 annually.
Okay. All right. You were talking about, what's your name again? Sorry. Kyle. You were talking about implementation of informational campaigns, and you're kind of relying pretty heavily on those campaigns to capture the market share. What does that look like? What is an informational campaign, and how are you sure it's going to be effective?
Sure. So our goal is to targeting these manufacturers, and so I think, I think we can pull up the manufacturers.
Yes.
Yeah. So our goal is to target manufacturers that have an incentive to inform the public and keep the public safe. I think that's a big element here. So what our goal is to go to these manufacturers and establish these relationships and showcase the value add of Crane Currency's technology and securing their brand equity. It would be a partnership, so we we've suggested that we could host something online, links to Crane Currency's existing security videos or what it adds to these parts, how they can fit onto these parts, and have that linked from a manufacturer, which could lead to the information that the consumers need.
And I'll add to that, when it comes to the government strategy, we've targeted a number of organizations such as the FDA and the World Health Organization that have a lot of influence over not only the supply chain, such as manufacturers, hospital groups, but also consumers. And so these are the main sources of information that consumers and others go to get this type of, or like for warnings and other things that are health risks. And so we recommend that Crane Currency approaches these folks to establish information campaigns and just release news articles.
Okay, single-use medical devices being used multiple times. Can you give me an example of the type of product that happens for?
Sure. So we actually talked to a leader in manufacturing in the medical industry, and the example that they gave us, there's a device that is used to hold the heart in place during a bypass surgery, and it's supposed to be discarded afterwards due to risk of germs, and also it was damaged all during the procedure. But it runs over $5,000 just for this one piece. So hospitals, that's the example they gave for one that's reused very commonly. And so again, that represents the loss of sale from the business, but also a good risk to patient. And a lot of the time, it's the hospital procurement team or inventory management team that's cutting the costs and saving the part. And the surgeon who comes into the next one doesn't actually even know that it's counterfeit. And they're partially liable for the lawsuit that can come for not checking and making sure all the tools that they're using are safe. So it's the surgeon is totally blind, and they have an incentive that if they saw a part that's been reused to not use it and refuse it to the hospital.
The only thing that I would like to add to that, if that's okay, Kyle, is what is the incentive for hospital groups to still take this on themselves, and surgeons as well, to not use these one-time medical use devices more than once? What we really see is the incentive is straight revenue. About $262 billion just in the U.S. is lost alone on deaths from lack of insurance claims or fraudulent claims or malpractice suits. And so with that, the cost of getting it right definitely is lower than the cost of getting it wrong. And so we see the incentive here that hospitals do want to invest. Hospitals do want to invest in these one-time medical use technologies, especially if they can be secured in this way, because there's miscommunication between the hospital and the surgeon a lot of the time on if these were used more than once or if they were specific.
So who do you approach here? So what's your strategy to enter in this medical device market? Are you going to create a pull strategy on the part of surgeons and doctors? Are you going to go after industry regulation? Are you going to go after hospital procurement? Are you where do you go to really drive sales?
Sure, I can talk about that. So, like we went over in the presentation, we believe that manufacturers are the key component. That's definitely our first lever. And we do want to make sure that we're going and talking to the manufacturers first, that we already have relationships through Craneco. That's going to allow us to put in the door. So talking to them is definitely the number one priority, but we want to also, if we're creating a strategy of targeting manufacturers and they're providing these products and they're selling these products to hospital groups as an added value, we also want to go to the hospital group directly and educate them and say, hey, this is what is about to be coming in the market, and here's why you need it, so that by the time the manufacturers make it, they already know they want it. So that's our second route. And then thirdly is the government aspect we talked about previously. And that's beneficial because when we talked to a manufacturer in one of the leading medical devices, they said that hospital groups as well as manufacturers, when the World Health Organization says, hey, here's the new standard, or here's what we recommend, or here's what we're going to look at going forward, they all jump on that and they take that straight to heart and they get on that right away. So targeting the third level of government, they're not necessary in an implementation of the plan. It's going to help us speed it up if they're hearing from the manufacturers that here's this is coming. The hospitals themselves are hearing, hey, here's how great it is, and then the government is saying, also, we say that this is the future. It's just going to provide the three-pronged approach, which is really going to allow us into the market.
And then if I could add on to that, surgeons within these hospital groups actually do have a lot of influence over the products, the medical devices that they use. So leveraging industry sales reps who can go out and represent a J&J or a Medtronic with Crane Currency's security devices attached to those, or security technology attached to those devices, and having surgeons say, "This is the product I want, and here's why," does have a lot of pull within the hospital groups.
Talk to me about the sales teams that you're talking about hiring. Where are those people coming from? What sorts of attributes are you going to be looking for?
So these are the four main roles that we found in most sales organizations, and we use studies from IBM to find these roles. You can see the functions: cold calling, finding those connections, connecting the product specifications to client needs, closing deals from a client executive standpoint, and ensuring that the client is successful in the long term. We also found the industry average salaries for those from a site called payscale.com, and the main skills that you would need to hire for in those roles. We go to the next slide. And then, of course, we also calculated the amount of investment you would want to have in your sales force. Cron.com quoted a number of 5 to 10% that you would want to invest in your sales force based on the amount of revenue you get from those streams. So we took the ratio of roles you would want in each group, multiplied that by the salary to get a number that we multiplied our total revenue by 5% first, and then divided that number by the total cost of salaries to get 60 people in the auto parts sales force and 30 people in med devices.
You talked a little bit about competitors. What market share do each of the competitors currently hold?
So as far as exact market share numbers, it's very difficult to tell because all of them are privately owned. As far as one of the firms that we talked to that is a leading brand is TrueTag, and they only have 9 employees. And so as far as their market share, it's very hard to estimate, but they also only have, I believe, 7 customers. So it's very small and growing. They're a new market entry, but as far as other ones, they're mostly private, so it's hard to get an estimate.
And I'd like to talk really quickly about a competitor case study that we did do in Neurotax, who are in auto parts. And we actually measured them against the motion service technology that Crane Currency has across 3 different metrics that I know Crane Currency, reading the case and talking to you all, really hold highly, and that's security, visibility, and durability. What we saw from the Neurotax, since it's a physical barcode that goes on a box, it can be replicated. It is not very visible, as well as the durability can be taken off at any time or ripped off if the package goes through any type of wear and tear. As opposed to the motion service technology, the tech is embedded on the actual product itself, is recognizable, and is not replicable. Those types of things will lift Crane Currency over competition such as TrueTag or Neurotech.
So if not auto parts and medical devices, then what?
Yeah, so we actually looked at quite a few. If you could pull up the name that slide. Yeah, so we actually looked at each one of these industries specifically and really delved into the counterfeiting problem with each one of these. Could you go to the fine art slide? So fine art, for example, there is a large counterfeiting problem, so about $64 billion. And recently, an art house called Sotheby's acquired their own authentication company called Orion Analytical. The issue here is that when you are talking about fine art, counterfeiting fine art, normally these products are older products and are not new. We're trying to apply the technology into new products as they're being made to verify their authenticity, rather than relying on someone else to verify authenticity and then us certify that it's authentic. Also, the dollar value associated with this industry just wasn't there. The revenue potential wasn't there. Nick, could you go back to the appendix?
So if auto parts and medical devices were your top 2, who would be your number 3? Is it fine art?
No, I think, Nick, could you pull up pharmaceuticals? Right. Yeah. So pharmaceuticals would probably be our number 3. The industry matrix that we used, I think we had 4 checks on pharmaceuticals. Yeah. So counterfeit pharmaceuticals is fairly rampant. The issue that we saw here is that Crane Currency uses a physical technology that cannot be applied to a pill and applying it to a bottle or packaging. Applying it to a bottle, we're not sure how that application could work. Also, one of the biggest drivers of counterfeit here is counterfeiters selling directly to consumers online for cheaper prices. And unfortunately, Crane Currency's technology couldn't get into that supply chain to stop that problem. So we didn't see the true impact potential we were looking for when we considered pharmaceuticals.
To add on to that briefly to try to answer your question. Pharmaceuticals as a whole is about 1.14 trillion, as it shows here, and over-the-counter pharmaceuticals are about 20% of that, which is a huge sum, still a huge sum. And so that is an industry that we can get into and right away without any additional development, because unlike over-the-counter, these are not, whereas over-the-counter pills are shipped from the manufacturer to the pharmacy and then redistributed in smaller packages, which is where we lose our value, because as soon as it's removed from the original packaging, it's hard to certify anymore. Over-the-counter drugs come in a smaller box with a set amount of doses, and that is something that we would be able to capture right away. The problem being that the reason why we didn't go with that and went with automotive and medical devices instead is that that's a place where we can fight for the full market share, and then we can still leverage our previous relationships we're getting from Craneco. Whereas with pharmaceuticals, yes, it's a lot of money, and yes, we can do it for some part of the market, but we're not able to tackle the whole market. And secondly, we don't have any existing relationships.
That's 17 minutes on QA.